I'll be sharing my screen in a second. But first, to give you a little bit of context of what we're going to be doing from now on, um, today, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the review feature we were planning on building out last time, or we, not like we were planning on doing it last time, but we were continuing our plan to build out a review feature so that this restaurant can now be reviewed. Right now, we currently, if you remember from our last ones, have two models, user and restaurant, and they are not connected, but we still have a really cool and functional app. Like you can still log in and see the restaurants in your area, right? Despite the fact that we don't have any relations. Um, when we code things out step at a time, right, you end up with a pretty cool app along the way. And I want you to think about how you do that when you're building stuff out. I want you to like, it gets unbearable when you talk to developers and you start hearing all of these like buzzwords like MVP, minimum viable product, and stuff like that. That being said, it is super valuable. Like the reason why all developers talk about that sort of thing is because they're super valuable way to think about anything. And MVP philosophy on design is ubiquitous for a reason. Like yes, a lot of people outside the industry associate with like, oh, you pumped out like a mediocre version of a product immediately, and then I have to deal with bugs for a while. That is true. That like that can be the case, right? But in terms of like, usually that's because we're designing everything MVP anyways, and then at some point somebody goes like, "Why don't we release it right now?" But everyone's designing MVP anyways for a reason. So just keep that in mind when you develop. Cool. We currently have two models that don't relate to each other, and we have a very cool app, right? So here I'm going to begin sharing my screen. I'm going to start with I reset my database between lectures, and I got this error. Does anyone know what this is? Why I'm getting it?
Did you delete your database?
Yeah.
Okay, so then you deleted the user as well, so you probably have to sign up for a new account. I'd say that would work, maybe.
Yeah. I would love to, right? But I keep getting this couldn't find user with ID equals 1 everywhere, right? Why would that be the case? Why am I getting this error?
Is it because a user with ID of 1 is still it's still a cookie, so you still have the session cookie attached to yourself?
Yeah, when you end up developing, you're going to run into this problem every now and then. Once we start working with cookies, like when you reset your database, that doesn't change what you did in the browser, right? So my browser still believes that there is a user like it still knows that there is a session key at a user ID that's sending over every time, right? But my backend is like, I have no idea what this ID is. So if you ever end up in this situation, you can just go over however you want to do it, right? The Chrome way is you can go over to application, you can go into this little storage, you can find these bad boys and just start deleting your cookies, right? And then you don't run into this problem. I also have edit this cookie, which is a nice little extension. But if you ever run into that error where it's just like, hey, I'm getting this error on session where it can't find something by an ID, that probably means you did something to your database and it now can no longer find the user that you're associated with. You could decide to deal with that on your backend by like, or in your console, right? Like you could make this instead of just being like, hey, user.find by session at a key of user ID, you can also have a little like, and if I don't find it, right, log them out, right? So you could always have like a little like user here, right? And then you could turn this into a find by ID. This is actually getting kind of annoying. So we currently have this returning, right? If user, return user, else. There's definitely a neater way to write this. That's not this goofy bit of code. else like session dot clear, then redirect to login path. That would be like a way to deal with that so that you never have that problem again. I find it useful to remind myself that I delete my database. And I get used to deleting cookies, but it's something you're gonna have to deal with every now and then. Cool. Just know once we're playing with cookies, things get sort of weird. In terms of debugging. I'm gonna sign up again. Cool. Nikki. My actual email address. My actual password. Cool. We are now back to where we were, right? So first things first, my goal is I want to actually like build out this review model so that we can get back to our like our actual objectives here, right? So here, right, we currently have the show page, and ordinarily, right, our next step would be to we want to create, first off, we want to create a review model. So let's go ahead and do that. Was getting ahead of myself there. Rails G resource review, and we can go ahead and say user references or belongs to or whatever. We could do restaurant references. Then I'm going to have a rating, which will be an integer, and a review or a content, which will be text. Cool. So now if we take a look at the migration that was generated, hopefully this looks right. Cool. I'll run Rails DB migrate, see if anything breaks. Great. We now have it working. I'm going to add a couple of little validations while we're here. Validates rating, numericality. I'm going to go greater than 0. Oops, that's not right. Less than or equal to 5. Sounds good. And then validates content length. I think you validate content like, let's see. Length. Cool. Minimum 5 characters. I just want more than a lol. Cool. Have I lost anyone yet? Great. So at this point, right? The like flat restful thing to do would be to like have a little button on this page to create a review, right? And then go to like somewhere to create that review, right? But if we go to Yelp, right? Let's go. Does this link me right to Yelp? Cool. Yelp actually like renders all these comments right below and allows me to like start a review right below. Or no, I guess it does send me over to a show page. I want to have it so that you can enter a review right on the page, right? My real goal here is to like basically make it so that this is the quickest, easiest way to quickly review your food, right? Or like review somewhere you're going. I don't want to send people to another page and off of this Google Maps page, because if they're going somewhere like to find it, they might as well type a review on the same page, right? That would be a better user experience. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to create this form for review on the restaurant page. And just remember, like we teach REST, right? And that makes sense, especially for routing. But at a certain point, like you don't need a new for every form that you render. You can just stick to the create actions. You can choose to customize for the sake of user experience. And that, so at this point right here, I am going to go ahead and create a little form for. Oops, let's go over to my restaurants views. Form for, I'm going to come back to this really quickly. Do F. Because one of the reasons I want to do this, I also want to show you something else while we're here. F.submit. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this actually, I'm just going to confuse you if I just keep this question mark here, right? So normally, right, here's what we would do right here. We would go over to like our little restaurants controller and we'd be like at rating equals rating.new, right? And this, we can go ahead and build this out real quick before I do anything else weird, right? F.label rating. F.text number field rating min max 10. I'm going to change that to 5 later, but I do want to test our validations at some point. F.label.
Hey, Nikki.
Yeah.
Did the does that min max, is that separate from the validations? So if you have validations that that numbered field is totally unrelated, then you still have to set the min max there as well.
Yeah. So validations help for when we're saving things to our database, right? This is just number fields can be set in HTML to have a minimum and a maximum.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is easily hackable. It's not safe, but it makes it easier for the user to understand what's going on.
Gotcha. So if it was just like this, you didn't have a validation, they could just change the max to more than 5 and got it. Okay, cool. Thanks.
I think I want a break tag before a text area for some reason. Cool. Review.new. Whoops. I'm going to close some of these. Cool. And then in our show, we're going to at review. Cool. Great. Text underscore area. Cool. Working through this. Cool. So now we have this little form, right? Now, at this point, one, you're going to be like, hey, so we should probably like include a hidden field here, right? To be like, to include that this restaurant is affiliated with it, right? One thing that I want to show you that I didn't last time we talked about nested routes is how to build a nested create action in a form for. And that's kind of what I'm going to do here. Is that cool? So first off, I'm going to go to my routes. I'm actually going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to comment this out for a bit. Do reviews only, create, maybe an update later. We'll just do this for now. Cool. If we go to our routes now. There we go. We now have this restaurant reviews path to a reviews create action, right? That has this restaurant ID, right? This can be pretty useful for us. Yeah. We can go ahead now. And ideally we can send over a restaurant here. We could like go into our controller for a review. And we can do a little like, I'm writing this because I don't like a find by ID would not error out, right? I want this to error out if I don't get the right ID here. Like if you can't find a restaurant with that ID, but I've sent something over in our params. This is just a decision that I'm making on the fly here. I'm saying, hey, only check for this if there's a params and a key of restaurant ID, but use .find. So if you have a restaurant ID and it's wrong, it errors out. Just a choice I decided to make while I was coding this. Cool. So ideally we want to use something like this, right? Def create and by bug. Yeah. Before action set restaurant. And currently this isn't gonna work, right? Or I can show you why it's not gonna work. The astute of you will notice that this is still posting /reviews. And if I type over here /reviews, I instead only have a restaurants at a key of restaurant ID /reviews. So if we refresh the page, oops. We now even get, when we refresh the page, it's gonna be like, hey, I don't even know what reviews path is for this form 4, right? Because I haven't created a reviews path, so this form 4 is gonna break immediately. What I can do though, and this is some syntax I just didn't show you, because sometimes I forget things. You can go ahead and do this. Now, if I refresh the page, we get a new kind of form, which posts to restaurant /1/reviews. Does everyone see what I did there?
Can you go over that just one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. If you look at this route now, this is now the nested reviews route for restaurants, right? And the way I did that was simply passing in this like array, starting with the least nested item and then the nested item, right? Where at restaurant, since we're on the show page, exists, and at review exists. And this is just the way to tell form 4, hey, I want you to send to a nested route. We're creating a rating, but it's nested under a restaurant.
So is this considered a nested form or no?
It's not really a nested form, right? Like, because in this case, we're only creating a review. It's definitely a nested route, but like a nested form would be something where it's a like a form to add a restaurant that has in it a
Right.
section to create a review.
Right, with the fields 4, right? It has to have a fields 4 for it to be nested.
Yeah,
form.
that would be
Even though the models
way
in
to
this particular form are nested, you would
Yeah.
refer to them as being nested. Okay. It's just
Yeah,
kind of weird to separate them in part. And
the routing is nested here, right? There, and when we say nested, it can be like nested is a term that people throw around in every sort of coding context. But yeah. So now we can actually post to restaurant /1/reviews. Cool. What it's actually using under the hood is the restaurant reviews path with the argument of at restaurant. And that's what we pass in here. Or that's what we passed in here. Cool. There's another tool you can use, right? This means that we can send to a nested route rather than like using a hidden field to like send over the restaurant ID. It's useful. Because now instead of using the hidden field, now it's going to be in our parameters, in our like URL parameters. So it is going to be a little separate. It's going to take like a little bit more work to actually get it there. In that, like, we're not going to have this nested in our required params. I'm going to just show you that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Jeez. Cool. So now if we look at our params, right? You'll notice that our restaurant ID is separate. Our review just has the rating and the content. So if you're coding this way, just keep in mind that you're not going to be sending a restaurant ID over in your params directly. I'm not going to be able to get it like that. Or sorry, not nested under review. It's instead going to just be here. So if I want to like do params.require review .permit rating content restaurant ID, you'd only get rating content here. But that's okay because we have at restaurant from the set restaurant method. Is everyone still following me here? You get like a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. Feel free to thumbs up in the chat or say thumbs down in the chat. So at this point, remember, so at this point, in order to create a review, right? We need a few things. We need a user ID. We need a restaurant ID. We need a rating. We need content. Here we have access to, if we did like review.new, let's set this equal to a variable so we can play around with it. Review params equals, and let's just copy this code while we're here. Cool. I could go like review.new, review params, right? And that gives us rating and content, and we just need the user ID and the restaurant ID, right? So let's instead do something like this. Review equals review.new. Actually, we're going to take one step further, right? If we want to pass in the user, we know that we have access to current user, right? So we can go ahead and do current user dot reviews dot build, and then review params. It's actually going to get mad at me because I forgot to do this. Has many reviews, has many restaurants through reviews. And we'll do the same thing on the restaurant class. Cool. Okay, reload the bye-bye. Nope. I have to do this again. Cool. We can just do cheese. Great. Now we do have, since we coded out some additional stuff. Did I not save? No. User first reviews. Forgot to save. Shameful. 1, 2, 3, 4. Jeez. Great. And now if we call review params, we have access to that. We call it user.first.reviews. We have access to that. And now we can go ahead and we can go say, hey, at restaurant or at review, rather, we're trying to create a review here, equals current user.reviews.build, which is, remember, another method that we have. Does the same thing as new, except it associates it with current user. Actually, let's do at restaurant reviews.build. There's a fun error that we'll get into eventually if I do it this way. If I want to talk about it. Cool. So now this goes ahead and this assembles basically everything for us, right? If we go ahead and now say, hey, at review. So we've like sent in the restaurant. We can now say at review.user equals current user. And that'll go ahead and our review will now have a user ID. Cool. So we can go ahead and pass this whole set of code into our controller at review.user equals current user. Cool. Everyone followed this bit so far? And we can go ahead and say if at review.save redirect to at restaurant. We can send them right back to that show page. Else, let's go ahead and render restaurants/show. Cool, which we can do because we still have at restaurant and at review, right? So here we now try to make this work. We can try this again. Continue. Cool. Press the page. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's actually break it. Jeez. Oh, stop it. And now we get like, hey, rating was 9. That was inappropriate, right? Cool. And the one notice is it does redirect us here to restaurant/1/reviews. I refresh this page, that's going to give me an error, right? Because it's a post only route. But that can be solved with a little bit of coding around it. Like we could make a route to do something there, whatever. But next up, right? We can go to our views and we can like show our errors. So we currently, remember, we have this layouts partial. So I can go ahead and say like render partial layouts/errors and pass in as record at review. Cool. Remember that my errors just takes in a variable called record, then iterates through all of its errors. Cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Jeez. We can now see it goes, hey, rating must be less than or equal to 5. Content is too short. Minimum is 5 characters. And then some terrible CSS. But we can now try it again. 4. This is a great place to get a lettuce wrap. I don't know, I'm looking at, that just looks like lettuce. Cool, and then if we hit create, we don't see anything. We're rendered back to the restaurants. So we can guess that this probably got created. We can test it out. We can go like, hey, Rails C, review.last. Cool. So at this point, before we go any further, I'm gonna like start rendering this out. If you have questions, on how, first off, let's double check min and max. Yep. Do we have questions on how this worked?
I've got one kind of conceptual question for you.
Mhm.
If you're going to have the review come up, like say a user is signed in and they've reviewed that show page, they've reviewed it before, in order for it to come up on a new review form for them, would you have to kind of create it an attribute on the user model for the review, or like how would you do
So
that?
you're saying you want it to like pop up and repopulate this form if they've already submitted a review?
Yes.
Cool, let's try it. Do restaurants controller. I think there's review dot find or build by. Let's try it. User. Current user. Oh wait, no, that doesn't work. User first. Find or initialize by. Let's try that. All right. Cool. So this is going to go ahead and either find a review or create or initialize one. Let's try it. Let's see if that works. Let's play around with it. Badoop. Find or initialize by user, current user, restaurant, at restaurant. Let's see what this does. Amazing. I'm really excited about this error. You all don't know what's going on, I think. Why would it say undefined method restaurant review path now? Why would it be flipping out about my path? Real AP points if you can figure this one out.
Is review not nested under restaurants in your routes?
It is, right? Let's actually take a look, right? What's the issue here?
Is it not plural?
Reviews, this is all working, right? This worked until I changed.
You need
What-
a review show instead of just create.
So for show, right? Right now, this is a form, right? So it shouldn't be like trying to create a show route here. But we're passing in something slightly different now. Where we used to be passing in a review that that was new, right? In this case, it's finding one that exists in the database. When a form for encounters something that exists already in the database, what does it try to do? It tries to send it to its update action. So right now, I don't have a route for update. If I do this, suddenly it works. I might CSS breaks because I didn't have something for an edit review form. But notice it now immediately changes this into an edit review form. This is crazy that it just did that for us, right? If you didn't follow this, first off, was a random question I was given. So it's fine. This was something that excited me, right? What we're doing right here is we're saying, hey, for the review, either build out a new review or if we already have one that exists with this user and this restaurant, just give that review. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go to see nearest restaurants. We're going to test this out. If I go to a restaurant that I haven't reviewed yet, like Dig, it's going to go ahead and it's going to like, I can now go like cheese or like, I love the charred chicken. Cool. And now in our edit action, it's now passing through this review, and it's changing our form into an update form. I'm going to go ahead and use this feature because we now just came up with a very interesting and fast way to edit a review, right? How are we feeling? Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down on that.
I have a question with another thing with nested routes. Could you say, do another model with, like, could you do this twice with one model, basically, with another model?
So you're talking like restaurant / reviews / users?
Well, I know that's look like they say not to do triple nested routes, but could you use restaurants and users in another nested route onto
Yeah.
itself?
You can do like user
cool.
/15 /reviews too, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's totally fine to do that.
Or could you do another one with restaurants? I guess I'm asking.
Yeah, but like if we're doing like restaurants and reviews, right?
Yeah.
That's the only really appropriate place for I guess you
Right, in
might
this
have like a
context.
restaurant /1 /users where it goes to see all the users who have reviewed a restaurant. That might be a reasonable opportunity. So yes, you can do that, right?
Okay.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and build out this update method because we now have it. Or first, actually, we should probably like actually show these reviews. I'm going to do that before we do anything else. Great. Div class equals cards /div. And here we can just go ahead and do at restaurant .reviews each do review. Everyone comfortable with this bit of code right here? We're on the restaurant show page, so we're iterating through. We've got access to an at restaurant. We don't have access to an at reviews. I haven't defined that in my controller. The way we get our reviews is we go, hey, restaurant, give me your reviews. Cool. We let our associations do the work. And now we can go ahead and we can do something like boop, boop. Rating. Review content. And actually what I want to say instead is I want it to be like review. We'll have like some sort of review user name colon. And then instead of just printing out the number 5, right? We can go over to our helpers. I can go right here and I can be like def review. And here I can do like boop star times integer. So now if I go back to my my view here, I can go, what did I just call this? I called it stars. Let's just call it stars. Let's see what this does. Username, maybe? There we go. I love the charred chicken. That doesn't look great. Let's give this a little div class equals review slash div. Each of these will be in their own divs. Nikki, 4 stars. I love the charred chicken. I just used a helper here. And I did a couple of different things. What was the weirdest part of what I did? Are we all following? Cool. I might decide, hey, actually, let's go ahead and make this a partial, right? So I'm going to go over to my review class and I'm just going to be, hey, review that HTML .erb. Go ahead. Do this right here. Now my show page, I can be like, hey, render partial reviews slash review, right? Locals reviews review review. Okay, and this will still work. Everyone follow me that far? Cool. Because this is so common, having a individual partial for an instance of something, right? We can go ahead, we can go say render review. And won't get mad. Everyone following me? In that case, what it's doing is it's being like, oh, you sent me an instance of a review. I'm going to go into the review folder, see if there's an ERB file for review, and I'm going to use that as the default thing to render a review with. Cool, right? And because Rails still is like, hey, I could be more helpful than this if I want to. Ah, gross. I can just go like this. Oops. Render at restaurant.reviews. Come on, buddy. And this is going back to working. When I say render at restaurant.reviews, what Rails thinks is, oh, this is an active record collection proxy for a model reviews. What it must want me to do is iterate through every item in this active record collection proxy and call render on each individual item in it. And then go into my review mod and then like for each of them, go over to this view for a review and print that out. This is crazy that it does this. But it goes ahead and works. How are we feeling on this? This is that AP Rails stuff. So if you want to do it the old fashioned way, that's super reasonable. Cool. We can test this out. I'm gonna go log out. I'm gonna go check. I'm gonna create cheese. There we go. 10025 as well. Guest. Shouldn't have said that part out loud. And now if I went back to, where did we review last time? We reviewed dig, right? We get our own field, right? If I go like to needs more cheesy products. Cool. This now shows up as well. gonna go ahead. So how are we feeling here right now in terms of all of this? Have I lost everyone completely, or are we feeling good? Or somewhere in between, or just I forgot how to feel good. Cool. So here, right, we now have this like update method that's working, right? That's going to error out unless you add an end statement to it. But we now have this like create action, right? I can go ahead and create this def update action. Just make use of the fact that our form 4 is doing the work for us, right? Just put bybug right here. I'm not even sure what we'll get this time. Let's go ahead and update this review. Add some more exclamation points. Cool. Now if we go into our params. All right, we can just call review params. Yeah. We actually see a couple of different things, right? We're noticing our restaurant params are still not nested. They're out here. Or restaurant ID is still not nested. It's out here. We're getting sent over an ID of 3 outside of this review, right? So that's, or sorry, outside of this nested review hash. So we can go ahead and we can go def set review at review equals review dot find params ID. And that'll give us the review again, right? We still have our set restaurant, right? But here we can go ahead, we can say if at review dot update review params redirect to at restaurant, else go ahead and render restaurants /show. I can spell. And so right here, right, we don't necessarily need to grab the current user again, right? We know which user it's going to be because it's already saved into our database. We already have an at review that has this user ID, has this review ID. The only things we really want to update are the rating and the content, right? So we can make use of the fact that our before action, whoops, let's do before action set review only update right now. Go ahead and find this review, update with this review params and redirect to the restaurant, or render it if we want to show the form with all the errors, right? So we can go try this out. Continue. And update this. And now it's updated. Cool. We just did a little fancy little update action. This form is handling it really perfectly, right? So this was a really good question because I didn't know it was going to do this. I kind of like in the back of my head, I assumed that Rails was going to be amazing. But it just basically built out our update function for us. You can test everything out. We can go ahead and try to. You can get this little error being like, hey, content was too short. How are we feeling so far? Cool. Yay. Cool. What do we want to build out now? Anyone have any ideas? So two things we can build out, right? One, a user show page that keeps track of all the reviews they've made. Oh, one thing I definitely do want to do before I do anything else, right? Is I want to make it so that you can see the average reviews for a restaurant, right? So let's go ahead. And we can now say, in our restaurant controller or restaurant model. First of all, let's actually post this up to GitHub. That's way too much, right? Cool. We can now go ahead and in our let's close these. In our restaurant model, you can go ahead and say def average review, right? Self dot first off, let's at this point def. Nah, we got this. Self dot reviews dot sum. Let's actually try this out somewhere else. Review restaurant dot first, or let's go like review dot first dot restaurant, because I want a restaurant with some reviews on it. Restaurant dot reviews dot sum rating over restaurant dot reviews dot size. That'll go ahead and work. In this case, we're using self, so we can just do this. That's probably a better way to do it. Let's try it. Dot average rating. Boom time. That looks like a 2.5 to me. Dot 2i. 2f. There we go. E1 means multiply it by 10. Cool. There we go. Average rating 2f. There we go. No, that's not gonna work, right? Because I want to do it 2i. I don't want to have half stars. So it's gonna be an average of 2 or 3. It's not gonna be it's not gonna be precisely accurate, but I'm sacrificing some accuracy for having those little stars. We could figure out a way to, if we want to like get really, if we want to get really granular on this, to make it round to the nearest 0.5 and then have a little emoji that gives us half stars or full stars, right? It would be mostly me just doing math in a helper method. But that's totally something you can do if you wanted to make it like actually show up 2.5 stars. Cool. I'm going to go back to our views for the restaurant. I'm going to go just right here. And then we can go ahead and say stars at restaurant.average review Must be. This will work right here. We do end up in a situation. If I go here, I get nothing. Which isn't bad. I expected to error out, so that was what I was going here for. We just get an empty p tag. We can change our stars method to go ahead and say hey, if we have an integer, right? If it's not nil, let's go ahead and print it. Otherwise, I might be wrong. Let's put a bybug right here. Int. Interesting. It's an integer named int that has nothing in it. Oh. It's 0 for some reason. Because in this case, right, if we do restaurant, that last, that average review, we end up with 0. Cool. If it's greater than 0, give it a star. Otherwise, no reviews yet. Cool. Awesome. How are we feeling? Cool. Why is it not sending me back? Oh, it's loading still. Probably because I spammed it 3 times, which meant that I was fetching 50 restaurants 3 times. Cool. How brain melted are we feeling? I can go into like filtering this stuff now. Or we could save that for another day and do something more chill. But I do want to eventually have the ability for us to like filter stuff by what kind of food there is, things like that. How are we feeling?
What do you mean, like setting up like scope methods?
Yeah, scopes are definitely going to be involved here.
Right.
Let's get started on it. We might not do some weird stuff. Might do like some pods next week where we just go ahead and build stuff out or something. I don't know. But let's go over to our restaurants index page right here. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to just do form tag to restaurants path method get. Cool. And we can go ahead. We can do f.label location. Let's start with location because that's going to be the one that's a little bit more straightforward. F.text field location. No f dot. Forgot this is label tag do because we're here. A little submit tag search. So this is going to do for me. Refresh the page. It's going to give me this little location bar and the ability to type like Dumbo into it, right? Dumbo, for those of you not in New York, down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. It is where the Flatiron Brooklyn location was. And you'll notice this just redirects me back to the index route, right? I am now still seeing the index page. No behavior has changed. So now if you look at my URL, you'll see like location equals Dumbo and commit equals search with it. And then like the little description of an exclamation point. This right here, when you're building a form with a get method, right? Get requests don't take in bodies. Instead, they use this sort of like question mark and then key equals value and key equals value and key equals value to make it work. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a bybug in my controller. Oh, boop. And now if you look, right, I decided to send us to location equals Dumbo and cheese equals swag, right? So if we go into our parameters, we now have location, Dumbo, cheese equals swag, right? Commit, search. So we can go ahead right now if we want to. We could be like params, the key of location. Or if we don't have that, just use the current user zip code. Yeah. Now remember our fetch by location method, just to give everyone a little bit of review, takes in a location, passes that into the Yelp search, right? And then it passes it in as a parameter to the Yelp API. So whenever we call this, we're sending a request to the Yelp API asking for 50 restaurants, and we're passing in usually a zip code, but I just said whatever the user passes in, or if they don't have it, use their own, that user zip code. Cool. I'm going to show you that this works. We can go over to, let's go to this restaurants controller. Boop. And you'll notice now we've got some Dumbo restaurants. Like we've got Westville Dumbo. I'm not lying to you. I didn't type that in. We've got Timeout Market, which is where you can get like pricier versions of all of New York's most Instagram friendly restaurants. We got Mulberry and Vine. Pretty good. I told you Jacob's Pickles was there. This is now, we now just by having this line of code right here, just being like, hey, use params location or current user zip code, we made this work. And that's probably because we did some smart coding earlier, right? We decided to use the MVC pattern and the single responsibility principle to go ahead and say, hey, our restaurant's job shouldn't be to find out what the user's location is, right? It should be passed in as an argument. Yelp search's job to handle this too. And then we use the fact we're just using our existing route with some query string parameters that are optional. If I go back to restaurants, it's still going to give me 10025. If I go to Normal, Illinois, it's going to give me some food from Normal, Illinois. How are y'all feeling on this?
How about like a message that comes out like results for location?
Yeah.
Could you do something like that?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I could think of, like the first thing that I would just do, right? Params equals params dot require or dot permit location. So when you have, this is actually, I'm going to explain this a little bit because I'm about to do something weird that I haven't really shown you. Cheese, right? If I go here, right? Params. I can't call params.to hash. It'll go ahead and say, hey, I can't convert unpermitted parameters to hash, right? But if I go ahead and I do like params.permit location .to hash, I can go ahead and send over a hash with location in it, right? So here I can now go ahead and say back in my index page, first off, I can go ahead and say params at params key of location. And now if we're here, I'm going to go ahead and say, anyone have a location for me? Anyone want to see their own town?
Richmond, Virginia.
See, Virginia, we'll do both. We type DC in. Do I have my buy bug still open? Cool. I'm going to continue out of that. Oop. Cool. DC, we get unconventional diner. Some things. This feels DC. I think the fainting goat is something. No, I might be making it up, but these all have suitably cool. Richmond, Virginia too. And remember, every time we're doing this, we're storing 50 more restaurants in our database, and our database is fine. It is pretty slow. Oh wait, I still need to get rid of this buy bug. That's why it's really slow. There might be a point where I decide like, hey, if we've done this search before, just print that out. But now we have Richmond, Virginia, and it's what I meant to show you is by passing down our parameters just into our index variable, I went ahead and I made it autofill our input with whatever we just searched, right? So if I now change this to Paramus, New Jersey, right? When we get back here, it's now in Paramus, New Jersey. And this is printing out. We can then do whatever we want, right? We can go ahead and say like, let's remember how to do this in Ruby. Hash equals test bees Nicholas Cage. Nicholas Cage is back in a big way. Everyone's remembering that he's an Academy Award winning actor. Is it entries? Nice. I've heard it's incredible. So I'm very excited to see that when I get a chance. So now I can go ahead and I can go say, hey, at params.entries .each. Because you're noticing this is an array of arrays, right? Go say like showing results for let's actually make a like if at params that entries that any I think that'll work. I might be bootlegging some stuff here. And then let's go ahead and do a little param. No. And
Wouldn't there only ever be one entry though? Or only one location?
I want to have it built out so that I can do this when I add more stuff, right? Like when we have like kinds of food and locations and stuff like that. But you're right, I'm prematurely optimizing. I think I got too excited by coming up with this idea to remember to go back and actually change some stuff.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Here we can do li param 0 colon. Let's string interpolate. Let's see what this does. Boop. Yep, that was. Oh, right. I forgot to send it over as a hash. Dot to H. Right. Cool. Showing results for location, Paramus, New Jersey. Not the best formatting, but we can solve that later. And now, if we go ahead, and we can like continue to add stuff on here, right? First we can, oh, I think we're going to run into one interesting bug. That, oh, first off, the interesting bug I was going to show you beforehand. Oh. Despite the fact that it didn't show up, it's saved, it's showing here, right? I forgot to mention this. Despite the fact that it didn't get saved, it's showing here. The reason for that is because I did something silly in my controller for reviews. Here, I did @restaurant.reviews.build, right? What this is saying is, hey, take this restaurant object and add a review to it. Now this @restaurant object is different from my database. It has a different set of reviews. This has not been updated. When we call .save and it fails, it's just going to pass this restaurant object with its incomplete review back down. And since we're just showing that restaurant again, it's going to iterate through all the reviews, including the one that didn't save. My easy way around this, so we can instead do something like current user.reviews.build @review.restaurant equals @restaurant. And what this is now doing, now current user is the one that has the extra review. And since we're not iterating through it, we don't have to worry about it. Weird. Cool. Try this again. And now it doesn't show up unless it's done. Shots fired. Cool. No, I just forgot to add OmniAuth or decided I didn't want to yet. This is like, at this point, yeah, I think that's less necessary of a feature for me than like getting reviews done, but probably more necessary than like this. That being said, like you've seen me build out OmniAuth, it would be the same thing. So here, I'm going to like add a couple more filters. And we're going to have one weird issue that's going to happen. I'm going to start creating a scope method. I'm going to let's make it so that you can search by a kind of food. Cool. I'm going to do scope kind of food. Kind of food. I'm going to slow down here. A scope method. We're going to review this. Scope methods are syntactic sugar for class methods that are meant to be used only for things that return active record relations. It's basically do some SQL to it so that we can put a bunch of SQL items together. So I'm going to pass self dot kind of food right here. Cool. I'm going to start by writing it out the old fashioned way, right? Where I go like self dot where, or because self is implicitly called, right? You can call it just where. And then at this point we can pass in some SQL. So I could be like kind of food, in this case relating to my actual attribute, like question mark. And then here I'm doing this weird thing. What I'm saying here, just to walk you through this, because this is something I've written a bunch of times, but I originally, like until very recently, was Googling Stack Overflow every time, and then I decided to like actually review my SQL. What this is saying is do a where for where anything where the attribute in the database is like this value that I'm passing in. And what I'm passing in is 2 wildcard symbols followed by a string interpolated argument that I was doing right here. So this is going to turn into something like tie, right? And what this is saying is look for anything that has the word tie in it vaguely. Like it'll also search for uppercase T and tie. And this right here is just a very useful bit of SQL. I'm going to show you that works, and then I'm going to show you that it doesn't work. Cool. Rails C. Restaurant, that kind of food tie. That first. Let's take a look. Tie market. That second. Tie sidewalk. Tie sidewalk is crazy. It's in it's by the Flatiron School in Brooklyn. It is, I swear, like it's a cart, right? And it's basically a closet that somehow they fit 2 people in and like 12 different tie dishes, and they're all pretty good. I have no idea how they do it. It's like a clown car of a food place, and it's pretty good. But you'll notice that this works, right? And being that it's a where clause, it's chainable, right? So I can go ahead and I can do like, hey, I want dot where zip code is 10025 dot kind of food tie. And then I get tie market. Cool. I can chain these together. That's the point of an active record relation query. Like we can tack these on, and it just goes ahead and makes more and more complicated SQL for us. It writes this for us. It goes like, hey, select restaurants from restaurants where restaurants that zip code equals question mark and kind of food like tie, and it makes that work. How are we feeling on this so far? So active record relations allow us to chain a bunch of query methods on it. The reason I'm being very emphatic about that is because we're about to encounter one last weird error. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, and this is just a part of it's because I'm just like coding my own weird thing and we run into errors sometimes. First off, I'm going to give this a local placeholder. 10025. And I'm going to give another location, but this one is going to be for kind of food. We'll pass in params, the queue of kind of food, placeholder, pizza, or something like that. Cool. Oh, and one thing I wanted to do actually before we do this, right? This right here was just a class method, right? But because it's an active record relation, it returns an active record relation. It's considered best practice to use the syntactic sugar called scope, which just is a fancier way of writing a class method. So this does the exact same thing as the code I just wrote. I might just even. Cool. I'm gonna just loop. Great. And it's going to go ahead. If I reload, I'm going to be able to do the same thing. Cool. I'm going to be able to still chain it. So this is the exact same thing. It's just generally considered good practice as a Rails developer to if you're making a query method, right, that returns an active record relation, instead of turning this into a method down here, just put it as a scope method. How are we feeling on that?
So where are you showing this when the user wants to do it? I did it like in its own custom route. Is that bad to do? Or
Nope.
like its own page?
In my case, I'm going to be using it differently, but you're totally allowed to go ahead and be like, we could do this in a couple of different ways, right? We could always have like a restaurants and then colon, like restaurants like by type / colon Thai, right? And yeah, I have no idea where they come in the labs. Scope method, the important thing to know is just that it is a class method that should return an active record relation if you're doing it properly. It doesn't break if you don't return an active record relation. You can use it to define whatever class methods you want to. It's just considered bad Ruby practice to do that, or bad Rails practice to do that. Cool. So we're going to get to one last error. I'm going to like create this right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start chaining this, right? Where I'm going to go say, hey, first off, this is going to work, this scope method. If you just turn in an empty string, it'll just give us everything. It'll match for all of it. Cool. So me doing dot, what I just call it, kind of food params kind of food. And this is getting kind of lengthy, right? So I might like consider doing like some other sort of refactoring. But I'm going to keep it like this for now. I'm going to show you one last thing, and this will hopefully, if you understand this, it will elucidate a little bit about what I mean when I say active record relation versus like an array. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to refresh my page. And I get undefined method kind of food for array. The reason for this is because my restaurant dot fetch by location method, right, goes to Yelp search, right? And Yelp search returns the result of a map statement. And a map statement is always going to give us an array. It's iterating from an array, it's turning into another array, right? So if I want to like do a quick hack around this, because there's a bunch of different things we could do, right? I'm going to actually have to go through this. And now instead of turning this an array, I'm going to have to take this array of items. I'm going to have to be like, and then find all these items in my database. Wait, I'm going to go ahead and do that. First, I'm going to have my map. We'll go ahead and say, we'll have this map. This is going to be the cheekiest thing I could possibly do. This is now going to return a list of IDs. I'm going to call this restaurants equals IDs equals. This map statement now has this do block, right? That is instead doing restaurant.find_create by do restaurant. So it's going to return, this whole end statement is going to return a restaurant. I can just call ID on the end statement, and whatever this returns, in this case, an individual restaurant, it's going to just give me the ID of that. Cool. Weird, right? So now I'm going to end up with an array of restaurant IDs when I finish mapping. So now I can just go ahead and say restaurant dot find or dot where ID. And I think you can go ahead. I think if we do like if I do restaurant dot where ID 1, 2, it's going to give me an active record relation that gives me both of the IDs. It's going to select from a list of IDs, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say restaurant IDs. This is a weird hack that I'm only doing because I coded myself into a weird corner. What this is now going to return is a list of restaurant objects from our database. I'm going to prove to you that now it works, and then we can talk about it for the rest of the next 5 minutes. Cool. I can now go, hey, I want 10025. I want Thai food, right? This is going to work. And I don't have my showing results yet working yet because I don't think I passed that into my required and permitted params. But the fact, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, is this part here still working because the find or create by is still happening before you're returning? Because I guess I'm confused that if you're returning it as an ID, how is it being saved to the database?
So finder create by runs, right?
And
This is, and then calling ID on the return statement of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is a little cheeky. But remember, you can just chain anything. Developers love that. So this is creating a restaurant, right? Returning its ID. And then this is all becoming a variable as a result of the map, right? Like this, or these are becoming a set of IDs because of the map. So I'm taking a list of businesses from a hash inside the response that Yelp gives me. I'm turning it into a list of IDs after first finding or creating them in the database. It's a lot, right? The thing I want you to take away isn't that you can write out this code. This is some goofy stuff that I wouldn't even do. I would probably refactor this so that like restaurant.find or create by, like I would probably turn this into its own method, right? So I don't have to do this all in one place. I would have my businesses.map go ahead and like do something else. Like I would break this out into a couple different functions, but the important thing to note is that there's a huge difference between an array and an active record relation. An active record relation, to be like more specific about what it is it's just a SQL query that Rails remembers. When we try it out in the console, it prints out the information like it's an array, but it refuses to turn it into an array until it needs to. One of those situations is when we ask for it in the console. Behind the scenes, it's just passing around SQL queries. Active record relations are very fast because of that. Like using active record relations are very fast because of that, and chainable. So under the hood, there's some weird stuff going on to make it so that we can chain active record relations. And most of that is just like what an active record relation is a SQL query that it'll run for you if you ask it what it is, or if you start to render it. How are we feeling? This was the, in a bunch of different ways, completely insane. We got into a couple of topics that I didn't intend for us to get into. This one was me realizing that I needed to code my way out of a corner I gave myself in like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. But how are we feeling? All right, it is 7:32. I'm going to let you all go. Cool. And next week, we're going to continue just building stuff out. Try to have some ideas because I don't anymore. Just be like, hey, what can we add to this app? I'm down to just hack stuff out. And next Thursday is going to be, I'm probably going to like maybe add on the off. I don't know. I don't care. But then next Thursday is going to be the CSS lecture that Jordan Romero, a former student of mine, who is now, or SAS lecture, who's now like a Genius front-end developer, is going to come back and teach. Cool.